Hey Martin, good morning. Oh, you might be muted. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not getting the audio from you anymore now. So let's yeah, the I'm no audio feeds coming through on my mixer anymore. Okay, we'll have you reset the call. Let's
You
try to. There we go. You're good. All right, excellent. I can hear you now.
can, you can hear
Hmm.
me now? Great.
Perfect. Yes. All right, there you go. Yeah, how you doing? Morning my time, evening your time.
That's correct. Yeah, here in the French Alps, it's at the moment nearly 6 p.m.
Thanks for joining me.
Ah, no, great. I'm very excited to be in your session.
Yeah, yeah. I know you guys reached out to me a little while back. So I'm happy that we got a chance to connect. And as far as just like connecting with individuals and organizations that continue to add, I would say, features and software that allows for advanced business analytics and anything, especially related to like finance and planning, I think is great. So I'm very eager today to certainly see some of the different features and everything else that you guys bring to the table for the Power Platform and some of the integrations that you have with Power BI, certainly. So this is going to be a fun session for me today for sure.
No, absolutely. No, we're very much looking forward to show you a few things and also, hopefully answer a few questions from the audience.
Excellent. Yeah. I think it's a great way to get started. I'd love to get a chance for you to give a little bit of an introduction, both about yourself, also the organization, and eventually kind of migrate our way into some of the things we'll be talking about today.
Absolutely. So I've been in the FP&A space, so planning and analytics, or as it's now called, extended planning and analytics. It used to be F, the F for financial, but planning has evolved so much that it's covering way more than just the financial side. So I've been in this space for the last 20 years. I started my career as a consultant for one of the major planning solutions providers. And then since then have worked with likely most of the major solutions that are out there for planning analytics. And we saw a big opportunity in 2015 to take this to a new level, to take planning analytics to a new level. And that was driven by two main factors. On the one hand, by self-service cloud-based solutions. So normally in our industry, solutions were very expensive, took a long time to implement. So it was typically in the at least tens of thousands of dollars and normally in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it took a month. And so we saw an opportunity to do this in a better way, to focus on self-service. And as opposed to reinventing the wheel, because all these solutions had their own reporting engines and front ends. So we thought, why reinvent the wheel when there's a solution out there like Power BI? We saw the power of Power BI very early. So I personally developed some of the initial demo environments for Power BI. And
Oh,
we really
okay.
liked the solution, and we thought this is the perfect environment to do planning as well. And now, for the last 7 years, we've been developing solutions to enable, on the one hand, data model automation, so to allow people to get value with Power BI quicker, typically for financial systems, like, for example, ERP, accounting systems, but also for other systems like payment solutions like Stripe.
Hmm. Hmm.
and CRM solutions like HubSpot. So as opposed to the users having to develop everything themselves, we completely automate the process. So they sign up, they add their solutions, and typically it's multiple ones. So they have a lot of companies on a particular accounting system and they want to get a holistic picture. And these are typically complex integrations. It's not like connector in Power BI where you just say, okay, I'm getting a few tables, but as you probably know, ERP and accounting systems can be very complex. And if you do this on your own, this will likely take you weeks, if not months, because you have to build, on the one hand, the integration, which is typically not that simple because it's API-based, token-based authentication, which is not that simple to realize in Power BI. But then also the entire logic, the data model, the metrics, the tax calculations. And then, of course, our key focus, which is covering planning for a large number of users and reasonably complex planning processes in real time. So where you have typically teams of hundreds of users working on a planning model, wanting to simulate things and work together in real time. So if somebody in the US changed something, the people in Germany can immediately see these changes and they can effectively work together. And yeah, Power BI is the perfect platform for this because you wouldn't get in any other solution better visualizations, reporting capabilities, and obviously it's not just Power BI but the entire Microsoft ecosystem. So we equally support Excel. So everything is, you have a single data model where also the write back is happening. And then typically the users use Power BI because it's the easiest and quickest to deploy with the best visualization options. But there are still use cases where it is important to have the flexibility of Excel, where people have complex asymmetric reports that you can't realize that easily with Power BI. So for these kind of requirements, they can equally use Excel, where we have an add-in as well.
And I think as well with the recent addition of the uh, composite models against Power BI datasets and analysis services, that allows for a lot of tool integrations with, I think, instant results that can feed back into any type of modeling scenario. So very, very useful stuff for sure.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because obviously, as I mentioned before, real time is a key requirement for us.
Hmm.
In planning, when you change something, you want to immediately see, okay, what's the effect? So we typically need direct query because we store everything in a central data model. There's no other way. Theoretically, there's an option to store data in a visual for write back, but that is a very limited, you can only store a very limited amount of data there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of other issues with a visual-based approach because you can only use then the data in this one visual and nowhere else. So we have to do everything in the data model, so the logic, everything. We also believe that this is the right approach. You don't want to have a model in a model. You have a data model and then some other model somewhere else. You want to have everything in the database and the logic either in the same database or in DAX, but nothing else, because that would just add complexity to the model. And so that typically requires direct query, but it is typically useful then to combine it. So for example, if you have your actuals, and these can be, in our customers, we have to deal with dimensions, for example, product dimensions that have millions of elements, so they handle millions of products. So in that context, obviously direct query can be a bit of a challenge. And so for that, and with the composite models, you can easily now combine the both. So you have the detailed actuals in a input mode model, and you combine that with a direct query model for the real-time write back.
Exactly. So like you said, that way the data is not just contained in a single visual. You can immediately see that information from any tool or visual that does any type of a write back. All the other pages and visuals and reports would immediately get that feedback and be able to pull that back in instantly through any direct query
Correct.
connections through there.
Correct.
Yeah. I know you mentioned like both some of the modeling scenarios here, of course, the tools that you guys have to provide some of these, and you also mentioned some connectors with some third-party platforms and other integrations with Stripe and anything else. Do you maybe I think I'm always a visual learner. Do you I think I saw earlier when we were talking offline, like a couple of diagrams and other stuff that maybe like might even show some of this, or yeah, like this here, so I can flip
Yes,
over and maybe we can put some imagery to these topics that we're going over. So
absolutely. I
okay,
think that is
yeah,
it's a
there we
great way
go.
to look at that.
All right, I'm flipped over.
So my screen is already visible. Perfect.
Yep, yep, we can see it.
So we cover the entire. Perfect. So we cover the entire process from initially the connection to the data sources. And so here we have, in essence, we have two products that let me see, this is actually not the right one. There's a better one. Where is this? This is the one. So here we go. So we have, in essence, two product offerings that that our customers are working with. One is what's called apps, and these are the end-to-end solutions for particular source systems. So, for example, systems like NetSuite, QuickBooks, Stripe, Xero, and a few other ones. So here the users get the complete solution. So they click a button, and maybe, as you said, the best thing is to see it. So our customers sign up to a software as a service-based solution. This takes 2 minutes. And then they get into this environment. This is what's called the Aquarius Modeler. And here they can manage all the aspects of their solution. So for example, if they want to add a new source system, and so Xero is in our neck of the woods in Asia Pacific, very popular. They have about 2 million subscribers. And the challenge is, even with a single company, it is very complex to integrate Xero, because the only option that you have is export data or build your own API integration, and that will definitely require development skills. So we allow the users to not worry about this at all. They can just click on add, authenticate against their Xero environment or whatever other solution they're using. And then we automatically build their data warehouse with all the tables. So, you know, the general ledger, the invoices, payments, and whatever it is. And this is typically pretty complex. So we typically deal with 50 tables plus and relatively complex data models. And then at the end, the users just click a button and they get to something like this. So they get their own Power BI model, which is just a normal Power BI environment. So they have the option to configure all this to their needs, but they have all the data tables from the respective system or systems perfectly formatted. So with the calendars, financial calendars, financial years, exchange rate logic. So all the things that you can imagine that would take a long time in Power BI to realize are there. Also all the DAX calculations, so from simple calculations like EBIT percentage to more complex calculations. So everything is ready-made. And a key factor is also then the holistic picture. So as opposed to, so typically the challenge with these solutions is they have multiple companies in these systems. For example, franchises that they each have their own Xero account, and then it's very hard to get a holistic picture. What's the result for the overall organization? And it gets even more complex if they're using different systems. So imagine if they have, for example, one subsidiary in the US on NetSuite, but they have another subsidiary in Australia based on Xero, and then they need to integrate this. And this is what we take care of. So we allow them then to just link these solutions and then immediately get the holistic picture of, for example, group results that automatically map accounts of the specific single companies to a general group standard. And within a few minutes, the customers get this kind of dashboards. So perfectly configured. With all the Power BI functionality, for example, also the AI features. So, for example, if I want to see here what's explaining this increase, I can just click here on explain the increase and immediately get what's driving the increase here. So, for example, here I see a particular company has performed very well, another one not so well, which has resulted in this overall total balance. So all the the Power BI features, even quite complex ones like insights and artificial intelligence, are perfectly configured, and the users have them immediately available. But they still have the option, like in Power BI, to configure everything to their needs. So they have the already perfectly structured data model, and can then just modify all these things exactly to their need. They can create a new report, or they can modify whatever we give them out of the box to exactly their needs. So this is what we're doing in our apps product offering, which is typically a more small medium product. And the XP&A suite, that's covering the enterprise planning requirements, which I can, of course, show you as well, and have a few demos. But I guess I want to give you now, and also the audience, the option maybe to ask some questions of what we have already shown. I've already talked a lot, I guess. I rather let them ask some questions, or ask you some questions.
Yep, yeah, if there's any questions, you're obviously welcome to drop it into the chat. I'll bring it up onto the screen. I think in general, I'll be curious about, some of the integrations in the actual like custom visuals. Like that's definitely what I'm always excited to see, is how people build out the UI. It seems like you guys are definitely aiming towards a low to no code platform, which is a very good thing for sure in terms of making this as easy to use as possible. So you have the connectors that are all UI based, and drag and drop and mouse click to set everything up, which then configures the back end for the clients. But similarly, from a front end experience, I'll be curious to see how some of these visuals work as well, to allow people to put in the data and do any of the forecasting and planning using the interface.
Perfect. No, absolutely. I might switch to another one, because this is more the more comprehensive one. So you can see here, we're covering here now a lot of different use cases. So from typical financial planning cases to sales planning, price simulations, driver-based planning, rolling forecasts, scenario comparisons, artificial intelligence-driven forecasting, project planning, S&OP, which is sales and operations, which is supply chain planning, allocations, HR planning, capital expenditure, and a lot of other areas. And the interesting thing here, that these are all interconnected, which is typically the situation in the planning process. So when you do your planning, sorry, this is actually the wrong one. I want to go to this one. When you do your sales planning, so initially start with, okay, what is my expected, what am I expecting to sell? So you start on the sales side, and then this gets connected with the financial side. So you have then an idea, okay, what are my salespeople selling? And the question is, what are the costs involved in this process? And that would be covered typically in the financial forecasting, financial process. Then you have detailed plans on the financial side. So if, for example, you have typically the biggest chunk these days is HR cost. So you want to do your detailed HR planning, where maybe let's have a quick look at that, where you look at your employees, and you want to cover all the details there. What's the salary, what are the on costs, what are other drivers that you have. And this is typically a master data management exercise. So you see here, for example, I have all my employees here, and the users can then, depending on their user rights, edit this. So they can say, okay, I want to create a new employee, or I want to edit their details. So, for example, the start and end dates, what is the salary that they're getting, how many hours are they working, and this would automatically calculate the HR expenses. So I see, for example, if I drill down here, so this is the master data side of things, and then here we have the overall financial aspect of it, which is driven automatically by this. So this would then automatically calculate, okay, I have a monthly salary of 5,000. I need to multiply this by 12. I need to calculate some on cost, I don't know, pensions, medical insurance, all this stuff. So this would be all automatically calculated. And so the users have then the option to even to plan on both ends. So they can either plan on the master data side, so edit all these details here, as you can see here, either driven by validations or just entering the number. So if this is now 40 hours, then this would then influence the calculation, or, for example, increase the salary on a detailed master data level.
So you have different inputs. I will say is you have different input options, and I will, obviously try to account for there's a little bit of a delay just between the continents, but so date has a pick list. Numbers you just type in. I'm
Mhm.
assuming text is a long text format, but it looks like depending on the type of data with any of those, do you similarly have like a pick list? Is there a way, kind of, how Excel where you can have a defined drop down where you can select from values? Is there a column in there where you can
Absolutely.
have like a pick list?
Yes, absolutely. I show you quickly, but maybe I use another one because this is then easier to show because I'm showing all the different scenarios there. So if we go to, where is it, the dimension edit?
Yeah, I've always really just from a front end perspective, because I definitely enjoy aesthetics and design a lot. I always really like to geek out on just UIs and interfaces and on how curated those can be for, in this case, like input fields and everything else. So
So this is now a typical example where we have all these different scenarios. So for example, if I click on that one here, this is what we call a linked
yeah.
dimension. So the in the end in our management environment, the business users can set up their models. And so, for example, they can set up a link. So they can say, this column here, product line, I don't want to allow a free text entry, but I want to link this to another. In the end, we call them dimensions, but in the end, it's another table. We typically deal with star schema models that have facts where the detailed records are stored, like for
Mm-hmm.
example the planning entry. So if someone says I'm planning 1,000 revenue in this month for this company, then that would be the fact record, and that's connected to the dimensions. So if you have an account table that has all the aggregation of accounts, for example, does this account go to that account group? Is it part of a particular financial statement? And typically a lot of other fields. And what we allow the user is to create all these dimensions exactly as they need them. So here you have a typical example in our demo where you can see we typically generate automatically a lot when they do their connections to the source systems that we support out of the box. But then we also support generic options. So if you have your data in a system where we don't have the complete end-to-end solution, you can add, for example, any database table, Excel spreadsheets, text files in the cloud typically, and generate your dimensions that way. So, for example, here for this one here, the product line, there is likely sorry, this is the wrong one. I have to switch. So you can see also, you talked about UI. We're aiming it to make it very easy for the user to switch between different databases. So, for example, we work with accountants and they have 100 customers and they want to quickly switch between their customers. So here, depending on how many customers they have, the user can switch to another database, which is also key. We typically also obviously want to completely physically separate this so that the data of one customer could never be confused with another customer. So we typically have the physical separation, one customer, one database. And
Mm-hmm.
then, so this is the one that I was using in Power BI. So I've just switched to that. And if I go now here to the product line table, this is the table that contains the validations that I'm allowing in the Dropbox that you saw before. So if I add another one here, which the users can, so they can just say here, I want to extend this, then this would automatically be reflected here in this table that you have now a new validation or a new item that the users can choose here. And in a similar way, we cover all the other requirements, and it's all based on the data types of the column. So, for example, here you see a photo. So here the users can use photos. On the next one here, you see English description. Here we allow them to put in formatted text. So also when they open it, they get a nice text editor where they can put then typically more extensive text. And it works the same way for all the other types. So for example, we also have funny things like icon sets, but the icon set here is in the end just a table. So this is just a table
Uh-huh.
that's
Yeah.
stored in a database where we just store the the Unicode character. And again, the users can use anything here. So they can use any.
Now this one, because I do similar with my reporting. Sometimes I'll write a measure that concatenates a symbol at the end to add a bit of aesthetic flair, but also maybe indicate like a some type of a status indicator. The symbol library though, how it renders, at least when I'm using it with Windows or Macs, it'll have a smiley face, but the smiley face looks a little bit different depending on the OS that you're running because they each have a different designer who illustrates that. So is that a similar thing here? Like that smiley face on Windows will look slightly different on like a Mac PC or a Mac
So
computer?
to be honest, with everything, we're trying to use standards. So this is not our own thing. What we're storing here is the Unicode character.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it will render just a little
this
different
is
then,
like
yeah.
It will render a little bit different, correct? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I always like to mention people for that because there are certain individuals who or certain companies where they have a very strict design guideline, and it's so I always like to make like depending on the device the person's viewing the interface on. One version of the smiley face might have a shadow. The other version will on Windows will have like the black outline. They'll all be the same Unicode character. They'll just display a tiny bit different.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But so the process is very simple. So we typically use these Unicode character websites where you can search, whatever you want, and then you can just say here copy, and you copy that character straight into here. So for example, if I want to now extend this, I can just click on edit and then just copy and paste the Unicode character that I want to use into, for example, if I don't know if I want to use hearts, copy that into the dimension table.
Excellent. Yep.
For example, this one here.
I've used those, and one of my other favorite like pro tips is the on Windows machines is if you do the Windows key and colon, press both, hold the Windows key down, the colon, it pops up the emoji keyboard that's built into Windows, and it like when somebody first told me that hack, like where has this been all my life? I didn't know this existed, and it's such a convenient way to pop those in.
That's right. That's right.
I do have a question now, just since we're talking about some of the interfaces. So based on some of the report pages you've shown, there's a couple different versions of like inputs that we've seen. We've seen one more at like a summary level at the lower section of the report. We saw the detailed field edit and entry. The question and let me see if I can get where is it? I'll just bring the question up. So essentially, I wanted to know, is this 4 different visuals, or is there one visual that can be reconfigured to do each of these things as far as like the custom visual that you add into the report? Here we go. This is the question I wanted to bring up.
No, it's typical. It is 8 different custom visuals. So the requirements are typically very different. I've shown you now 2. So you've seen the table edit for editing tables. There was the one with the validations and all the pretty advanced table operations. And the key thing is also here. So we typically need to handle very large amounts of data. So you can see here on the page, not on this one, it was on the previous one, but we deal with 1 million records, typically in dimension tables. And so our visuals can handle these kind of huge data volumes very effectively. The other one that you saw before is Matrix, which is one of our most widely used ones. You saw it before already briefly. I'll show you a little bit more because that is a quite interesting one. So this one, there is already a few things in there that the experienced Power BI users will like. We have, for example, the option to do selective column draw down. So I think this is something that a lot of people ask for. So we can give that to them. So if I, for example, want to expand now the first quarter, I can immediately do this here without affecting the other ones. So you have already a quite nice user experience here where you can do things that you can't do in Power BI. For example, I can expand this one without having to expand the other ones. But the key power is in the right back. So you have now the option to change data on any level here. And you can either do this, very simple, say, okay, I want to do this now and increase this to minus 200,000. So it's an entry on the lowest level. Or you can do this very with very sophisticated tools. So if I do a right click here, so you can see now already a few options here. So you can see add, which means I want to add an amount to an existing value. For example, I want to add 1,000 to an existing value. Or you can say when you're on an aggregation, for example, here I have the cost of sales total here. If you want to enter the same value on every child on that level, you can use children. So if you use children, you could say I want to all the children 1,000, and then every children in this group would get 1,000. You could do relative changes. So you could say a relative increase. I want to increase this by 10%. And maybe let's just do this quickly so that this is a bit more interesting. So for example, my cost of sales, I want to increase by 10%. So I do a right click now, say relative increase, 10%. And now it does this change, and you saw how quick this was. But this has affected thousands of records in the database, and this shows the power of the engine. Because so this was a simple entry, but you have to keep in mind this has to be done for every element in this hierarchy. So every element was now changed because it was affected by this 10% price increase. And we typically deal with multidimensional models. So we have, in this model, we have accounts, we have periods, we have companies, we have cost centers, and so on. So, typically you have 5+ dimensions that are specifying your data model. And so you get into situations where you have this single entry probably wrote a few thousand records into the backend, which you can't handle in a visual anymore. So in a visual, you can handle a few thousand records at max. So you need the power of the central data model, and also of handling right back in that central model as effectively as possible. And this is, I guess, our key thing that we're offering. So to have very sophisticated mechanisms to handle large concurrent number writebacks in planning. So we're using in-memory tables, so similar to that Vertipack, although it has nothing to do with Vertipack. We're using also in-memory tables to handle these massive write-back operations as effectively as possible.
And that was actually going to be one of my questions, is because I know there's many different places to write back to, and yourself, and between some of the other tools, I know between Infra, Zipper, BI, Power On, they each write back to different systems. So I am kind of curious about the integrations in the composite model. So that this sounds like writes back initially to kind of like a proprietary system that you guys have that is then written back to Azure that's reincorporated into the model, or?
No. So there's nothing proprietary in our offering. We write back to SQL Server. So SQL Server is
Azure
our default platform. Exactly, it's Azure, but we equally support on-premise the old SQL Server.
Fair enough.
So when the customers are creating a subscription with us, we automatically generate the Azure SQL tenant for them, but they equally have the option to use their own tenant. So we have very security sensitive companies like the US government and larger enterprises. They don't want somebody else to manage their SQL tenants.
Yep.
So we allow them on the one hand in a hybrid installation to specify their own Azure tenant, or to install all our components on premise. So we have a software as a service solution, but you can install this on premise if you want to. We don't necessarily recommend it because obviously you have to worry about the installation, you have to maintain it, as opposed to the cloud solution where we do all that for them, but it is technically possible.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and like you said, I think the biggest thing is in general is you provide the tool that allows the communication and handshake between visual and services, but no data basically gets exported outside of the tenant. It all stays within there.
Exactly. Yeah. So
excellent.
We don't touch the data. It's just processed by our API. So we have an API that's handling all these things, which even means that if customers want to integrate our stuff, our write-back capabilities and planning capabilities into their own solution, they can. But to be honest, Power BI and Excel are so powerful that there's typically no need for that.
Totally fair. Perfect. And you guys have, as you said, I think about 12 different different visuals that to use depending on the scenario, essentially, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I think it's 8 at the moment. So maybe just
Or
quickly,
eight.
so Gantt is for project planning. I show it to, as you said before, it's always better if you see these things. So Gantt is a project planning chart where we cover typical Gantt requirements. So where you see a typical Gantt chart with tasks and groupings and so on. But this unfortunately takes a little bit when I do screen sharing. This is normally much quicker, but with screen sharing, this takes some time to refresh. So here you have now typical Gantt requirements where you see the task, we see start date, end dates. But the big difference is now that you can edit everything. So if I double click here, I can either create a new task and say, this is the new task that's read. And read starts at a particular point in time, has a particular progress, and I can then also specify, for example, resources for that task. So you can manage all these things directly from Power BI with the visualization, but all the data is not stored in the visual. It all is part of the central data model, which is
Okay.
just typically a relational table.
Yeah, Gantt charts have always been one of my favorite types, and somebody's we already had a viewer pop on like they were waiting for this specific demo because it was one of their favorite visuals that you guys have apparently. So, and this like
Yeah,
anything else, you just
correct.
write,
So
right.
that was
Go ahead.
Gantt quickly. Visual. Sorry. No, you go ahead, Reed. I'll start when you finish.
No, yeah, I was just saying the with the Gantt chart, I definitely really enjoyed that as when it comes to project planning and other stuff. But for the most part, all the ones that are available, even the advanced ones, are primarily, it's consumption. It's not a write back. So to be able to use that to push changes back and have that inside of Power BI as a management tool to update the statuses of the projects without necessarily having to pay for like another platform for project management would be pretty nice.
That's exactly right. Yeah, all our visuals are right back enabled. So this was Gantt. The next one, which is a very interesting one, is visual planning. I think I'll show you that quickly because the audience might like this. So this is a visual that allows you to do your planning in a chart as opposed to entering a number. So you see here, this is a typical driver-based model. So I have quantities here that I'm forecasting to sell. I have prices here. And then I have outcome indicators, like for example, based on the current quantity, based on the pricing, this is the total sales, this is my gross margin. And then you can add as many other drivers as you like. So for example, here I've got tariff changes, I've got US dollar foreign exchange rates. These days, typically, I mean, what we see at the moment is, massive changes with energy prices. So what you could do is add another driver here for energy prices that then would become part of the model and allows you to simulate these things directly here in real time. But just coming back to visual planning, so I can just go here into now the edit mode. Obviously, not everyone will have this option. We have very detailed security rights for everything, but it's in the end, as it's all part of the single model, it gets relatively easy to maintain because you don't have to worry about doing this in a single visual. You just do it once in the data model, and then this flows through everywhere. This means they have certain rights in Power BI. This means they have the same rights in Excel. So it is based on the model and not based on a visual. And I can then just do my planning, as you can see here, visually. So I can drag the chart up and down and see immediately what are the effects of this. So this has gone up to 6,874. If I take this a bit up, I'm now at 7,000. I can see this is 44% above my comparison value. And I can take this further. I can say, okay, I only can do 7,000, but I still want to change that one. So if I turn this on now, keep the total constant, I can now change this, and you can see the other ones are adapting automatically to keep this target in place. Then you have the option to do this on a percentage basis. So I want to have, for example, in March, 27% or 24%. And you also have the option, if you don't want to drag, I can also enter the value directly, and I can lock it. So this is at the moment one of the big features that we're working on, which is called constraint satisfaction planning. So you have constraints. For example, you can only produce that much, or a variety of other things that are limiting the model. And so in this case, I could assume, okay, we can really only do the 1100 in this period, lock it, and then that's locked. And even if you do the changes on the total and so on, this would stay constant.
So the lock, does that mean it's being written back, or does that mean that's no longer editable by, like, say, other people or anything?
It's fixed. It's fixed. So it's fixed on that particular value. So this means if I lock this here now, it will be always 1100 no matter what.
And is that just for your user, or will that also be for other people who are in this?
It's always everyone. It's always everyone.
Okay, so that, like I was saying, that's good to go. So anybody coming to this will see your lock, basically, or will see the lock that was placed over here. Okay. Out of curiosity as well, permission levels, because for like the workspaces we have, like the viewer, member, contributor, admin. Similarly, for the visual, is there different permission levels for what people can do as far as the interactions with the visual, or is it just if they have access to the visual, anybody can say lock, etc.?
Maybe I start before this. So as you can see here, our focus is the business user. We want to make it as simple as possible to administrate these rules. So we have wizards here where you can administrate the rights, which are in the end very similar to RLS, but even easier to implement. And our RLS is entirely focused on write, because we would take automatically the read access right, but obviously there's no RLS for write back. So this is what our users can do, and they get a wizard where they can say, okay, this Active Directory group or this user is allowed to write back. The simplest option is a single element. So, for example, this user can change the budget. But typically, it's a combination. So we say, okay, this user can do the budget for 2020, or it can be more complex things. So if you have, for example, workflows, you need to check the workflow status, and then it's becoming a dynamic rule. So you can also define dynamic write-back rules that are then put in place. So this is on the data model side. On the visual side, you have the option to configure these things. So for example, if I go to edit mode here, you have then the option, in addition to the data model rights, that will always apply. You can't stop them. So the rules here would only limit users more. So you can't allow them more than what's possible in the data model, obviously. So if you want to limit now the rights here, you can do that. So for example, if I go here, you can now specify, is the user allowed to splash at parent, means is he allowed to enter on totals? And there's a lot of other things here where you can exactly specify, in this visual, what are the users allowed? That is then inherited and is then applied when the users are using this visual.
I'm really liking just the fact that based at the artifact, I'm using the Power BI term, but like the every single element can be configured to give people permissions and what they can access, right, and everything else, which I think is good. I mean, it's similar like governance features with a workspace. You don't want to give too many people admin rights because then things break, and you want to know who moved your cheese with some of those. So like, I do have a couple of questions queued up that I wanted to bring on as well from some of our people. So one, if I go over to here, Kavita had another question. So she wanted to know, like, can you create milestones and connection dependencies? So this relates back to the Gantt chart, but related to that visual, are either of those options or features for the Gantt chart visual?
Dependencies in what way? Has she elaborated on this?
So that can be something where we'll ask her for a follow-up. Exactly. So she, if you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on it, I would guess milestones.
I can imagine.
Go ahead.
So I think what she probably means is
Mm.
if you have a task that is dependent on another task. So you say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we can only start task B if task A is
Yep,
completed.
correct. That's what I would think.
So we don't have the dependency directly in the visual, but you can set it in the data model. So as I mentioned before, we typically have the logic in the data model, and you can then specify, for example, if the end date of task A is changed, then also change the start date of all the tasks in that group.
Okay, okay. Excellent. And then one other. Yep, there we go. Matthias wanted to know, is there any kind of like driver-based planning or anything else besides, I would say, like the number adjustments and entries that you're having with this for some of the writebacks, or I would say like advanced planning or forecasting features.
Yeah, I mean, so in the end, so you can see here we're combining different visuals together, and depending on the driver, a different visual might be useful. So, for example, for prices, and this is a nice example. So, for example, what's happening now is inflation. Is people want to say, okay, if I increase my my pricing until the end of the year to 3,000. So this was one of the shortcuts that you can use in our visuals. So if you use R, it would automatically fill it to the right.
Oh,
What's the effect of that? So at the moment, you can see if I save this now, I could then immediately see what are the effects of this particular change. So that would be another driver that you can use. And here, my driver is the price. Here, the driver was the quantity. But in the end, the driver is whatever you want it to be. So if you want the driver to be the freight cost or the product standard cost or the sales amount or the tax amount, this is just another
mm-hmm.
item in the model. So if we look at the underlying model here, this is just a metric or a driver that you have set up in your model. So in the end, you're completely free to do this. So for example, if I have here my exchange rate, this is something that we handle automatically. So we have default automatically load the current exchange rate and then do the conversion automatically. But if you want to overwrite this, for example, and change this here, so for example, particularly for forecasts, the users can do this visually here again, as you saw before. So this is the same visual. So this visual and that visual are the same, but here we're using a bar chart and here we're using a line chart. But you have the option to change it with all the features. So I can keep it constant, I can do it on a percentage basis. And that way you can have as many drivers as you want.
Okay, excellent. Yeah,
So you saw now
perfect.
this went up to, this changed now. So the value changed to 17 million and before it was less. So you have this real-time feedback, you change something, you see the effect. But
Mm-hmm.
the key thing to understand, this is not just for me, a single user, but all my 500 other colleagues will have the same result. And because they all work from the same single data model, and they get the results at that particular point in time.
I like it, and like I think it fosters collaboration. I guess actually a follow-up question to this that I personally have is there any maybe outside of the built-in commenting feature in Power BI, is there any way to do commenting or communication between members of this workspace with any of the planning or changes? Looks like
Yeah,
there's the
absolutely.
built-in
So
one,
there's a
yeah.
variety of things.
Okay.
So you have the option to comment directly on a cell. So I could add a
Mm-hmm.
comment on a particular cell level, or you can do it here. So you can see I can add a new comment here, which is then, you can make this whatever you want to. So you can specify also the level of detail. If you do it in a cell, sometimes this can be too much because as I said, we have 5-dimensional models. So if you store the comment on a very detailed level, you might not see it. So then you have the option to specify what we call a comment model, where you can set the level of detail that you want to use for the comment. And then the users can use the comments in that way. And as you can see, it automatically populates the Power BI filters automatically. So this would mean the comment is automatically written back to the correct level of detail that you're working on. And you can only then administrate, for example, if you have a workflow like we have here, you can only administrate the workflow detail as you see fit in that context, and that would kick off a a process as well. So if I put in, for example, approved here, then this would mean that this gets locked. So this scenario, Northwest Division for this particular plan type is locked and the users can't change it anymore. So we have this option to control these write-back scenarios and make them part of a process. This could also, for example, send an email. I've just submitted my forecast. My boss, Reed, gets automatically an email. Martin has submitted his forecast with a link. Okay, this is what he did. You can click on it, you can check it, and then you can approve or reject it. If it's approved, then what I just said happens. So it gets locked and the users can't change it anymore. If you reject it, the user gets an email, hey, this is not right. You have to change something, and they can change it again. So this can be very sophisticated, and as sophisticated as you want it to be, with not just the comments being applied to it, but complete workflows.
Okay, I like it. And I think it's for sure the communication back and forth and being able to leave notes is very important. So I'm definitely glad that you have commenting at a few different levels that can be applied within here. And one other question pop up, Tenacious Data, again, one of my favorite usernames. With the worldwide recession, are you seeing firms more interested in FP&A versus like the very fast go-go days when anything worked because of all the liquidity and cash flow that used to be in the systems?
Yeah, to be honest, really, it's crazy. Our business is really exploding. We just signed another major deal yesterday in the six-figure digits.
Oh wow!
It's going absolutely crazy because in these dynamic times where things are changing, dramatically. On the one hand, the users want to be able to simulate. They want to see, okay, if that happens, what does that mean? But they also want more effective processes. The organizations that we often deal with before they come to us, they have spreadsheet-based processes where hundreds of spreadsheets are sent back and forth, horrendously inefficient because you have to send out the spreadsheet via email, then the user gets it, puts in the numbers, spreadsheet gets sent back. This has to be then added up. So this either they're using some kind of other spreadsheet that adds them all up. It becomes horribly slow, ineffective. Once there's a change, the whole process starts again. Email back to the person, change the spreadsheet, send the spreadsheet back. So and they want to make their entire process more efficient. So what we see, for example, when we deal with customers, so their forecasting process takes weeks, and so they were using Power BI. They were looking for a solution that supports their platform of choice. And so after implementing the forecast, which was in the end is what in my days prior to Acterys, an FP&A planning project meant 50 person days on average to implement this. But as things are so simple, I mean, you saw already that how easy it is to change these things. And if you know Power BI, then you know Acterys as well. So if I go, for example, here on this visual, in the end, you just configure what you want to have here. I want to have a drill down path from account group to name. I want to have columns for my company. I want to have 3 different scenarios here, and that's it. So then immediately you get all the features. You can drill down, drill up. You have the cool features like custom tools, all this stuff. You have the comments there. You have the option to change it, your visualizations from, waterfall, absolute, all these things. But the most important thing, when you asked me before, I think with the edit options, is the option to add your own calculations. So, things like these financial statements are not easy to realize in Power BI. So it starts already with formatting that can get complicated. In our case, there is not a single DAX here, which means it's also extremely fast. So for example, if you want to add a new calculation here, you just right click row after, and I say, this is read, and read is this plus this, and everything is immediately there. Then you can choose the formatting. So if you say, hey, I want to have this now in a different format, I want to have this in a percentage format, then that's it. If you say here, I want to have an underline here, you add the underline there. So you have these options in an extremely simple way, as users are used to from from Excel, where they have the full flexibility here, but all on the single central data model to set up the reports exactly as they want to. And this brings me to a bit of a new thing. So I mentioned before our focus is on the data model, and everything in the data model is as little as possible in the visual, only what you really need in the visual. And this also applies to formatting. And this brings me to a new feature that we have, which is what we call data-driven formatting. So I guess many of the audience will be familiar with ESG reporting for environmental, social, and governance reporting. And here you have very varying formats. You have, for example, fossil fuel percentage 35. This is a percentage format. This is a ton. This is a percentage again. These are liters and so on. So it's not simple. If you do this in DAX, this will likely get, on the one hand, complicated, on the other hand, very slow. What we do is here, we handle this in the data model. So the only thing that you do is you specify what's the column in your data model that contains the style. And this style is in the end just another column in the dimension. So if you have in this case, it's an ESG metrics dimension where you handle your metrics. And the only thing you have to do is you just put in the format string for this ESG metric. This will then be automatically applied wherever this metric is used. So if you have this, in 50 Power BI visuals, they all will be correct. If you want to change this and say, hey, this is now green, or this is now percentage, or whatever it is, the only thing you have to do is change the format string, and it will always be correct. So I show you this quickly. So if I look here for ESG, so you see all the parts of the model, the users can also easily edit directly in Power BI. They don't need they can do it in the model if they want to, but that's typically a Power User tool that is limited to more advanced users. But if they have the user rights, they can do all these things directly in Power BI as well. So here you see now the dimension with the ESG metrics, where I have the group that I want to use here. I have the metric, the targets, and so on. And then here you see the format. And so the users can now either, copy and paste their own format, or they can say, I want to use one of the pre-existing ones. So for example, this one here, which is, this kind of number format, this color, this font. So if I change this now, select this correctly. So I just save it. And if I go back to my ESG report, and it, of course, not just limited to that one, but anywhere where this metric is used, and I just click on refresh, then we will see that this format is automatically applied. So as opposed to having to modify 58 visuals in all your different reports that you have, all this is done automatically. The only thing is you set your style parameter correctly for the visual. And this means all the formatting here is correct, as long as it's maintained properly in the data model, which you want. Yeah. So you want to make it as simple as possible for your users. You don't want them to spend time in configuring visuals. Once correctly in the data model, and then it should automatically apply. In this case, it's not a very nice one, but just to show the change. So this is now bold, with an underline, and it's immediately there wherever this metric is used.
And you're using some versions of IBCS, I think, as well. With I'm noticing the headers with the solid. What is it?
Correct.
Solid,
correct.
Outlined, hatched.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I like it. And
also
like
the charts, so you can switch between absolute, relative, waterfall display. So the users can do this directly in the visual, and then also edit this. So for example, if they want to change I want to compare now this versus something else, they can dynamically do this directly in the visual. So if I want to compare this now to column 4, I can immediately change that, and you can see this is now showing me column 1 compared to column 4.
Okay, yeah, I like it. You guys have a lot of different tools depending on either the input or the output, both for the data capture and then the expression of the data in many of these different forms. I'm assuming you guys probably have a healthy platform of videos or content that are kind of like tutorials for people to get further education on any of these specific visuals.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have very detailed video channels. So if you just look in YouTube for Acterys, you will find hundreds of videos. I can type correctly. Hundreds of videos. Oh no, this is just my slow internet connection. It looks like it's taking some time. But yeah, no, just search for Acterys and you will find it. The other thing that we have is we have a knowledge base that also explains everything. The only thing for that one, you need to be a trial user or a customer.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can only access some of the content, but it is very detailed. So we have hundreds of articles here that explain every part of what we do. So from the system requirements. So this is not the option that a user without access can see, but if you sign in, you will see a lot more there. Of any detail you can imagine, and also best practice. How do you set up, I don't know, intercompany elimination? How do you set up asymmetric reports and all these things? So all this is part of our knowledge base.
Perfect. Very good. I think like with any of these, the having it as intuitive as possible for people to use is a good thing, but then also the additional documentation, anything else that allows people to then get as in-depth or advanced with it as they want to will be very useful. So I'm glad you have a good system set up for all of that additional learning. Yeah, I had some good questions. But this has been fantastic so far. I know we've managed to cover a lot today. I've appreciated a lot of the sharing that you guys that you've been able to do, and I definitely got to learn quite a bit more about your overall platform. I knew you at least had some write back tools. I definitely did not realize you had nearly as many custom visuals as managed to see today. So yeah, I think you managed to cover a lot of business scenarios related to forecasting, planning, and I'd even say just FP&A type statements as well. So this has been fantastic.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. One thing maybe to add to this is, in addition to the custom visuals, we have Power BI apps. So these are the solutions for particular source systems. So which is like the end-to-end solution that we discussed before. But then we also have what's called rapid results packages, which are templates for particular use cases or industries. So yeah, as you can see, unfortunately, it looks like when I'm sharing this, the internet connection gets very slow. But if I open this one here, so if you go to our website and you go to rapid results packs, you can see all these templates, which are similar, like in the end, like apps. So for a particular scenario, like, I don't know, procurement controlling, or software for software service companies, and many, many more. So I hope this is loading soon here. Where the user get a starting point. So they get the data model, the metrics, the Power BI reports, the dashboards, and so on. So here we are now. So you can see planning analytics for the hospitality industry, planning for ESG, economic, you saw a little bit today, planning for software as a service companies, event analytics, planning for government, procurement, financial planning, consolidation, logistics, agribusiness, gym financial. So we have a lot of areas here that we cover with templates.
Very cool. And I think that helps to people get started as well. And the term that I like is the art of possible. It shows them what configurations and designs can be put into this. So yeah, having theme galleries is definitely something I encourage. And are these
the
ones
users can even trial this. So if you
go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, so
So
it
the
looks like
users can even
okay, yeah, you
trial
can
this.
download this. Yeah, that's awesome.
So that you can't download it, but
Oh,
you
well,
can
you
see
can
it.
access it. Okay. Yeah, gotcha.
We have to be a little bit careful that our competition is not taking all our IP. So you can try it. So these are interactive reports that the customers can use. So, for example, this is the hospitality one. But if you want to really use it, then you have to have a chat with us.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. It's enough just to get to whet the appetite a little bit and get people interested in having a further conversation if they actually want to explore the product in more detail with their data or anything else.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Very cool.
So you can see here one. This is for hospitality. So like the user would get all their, in this, for example, restaurants or hotels or whatever it is. They get, this, you saw it before. This is our no, actually, I haven't shown you this. This is our variance visual, which allows you to do small multiples variance comparisons. And then they get all the metrics for a particular site. They can even see where it is. on the map. They can compare it against each other, and then a lot of other reports that are already predefined, that they have immediately available for them that cover their particular industry requirements.
Excellent. Love it. Yeah, this has been really great today. I know we're about at the hour and everything, so I think we can start wrapping up. But I like I said, I've managed to learn quite a few new things, and the biggest thing that I like with any of these is being able to expand my horizon on what's available for the platform for customers to certainly just be able to, I'd say, transparently, recommend depending on what they're looking to pursue, and just knowing what's out there, I think is certainly important from at least from a consulting perspective, to be able to accurately tell customers if they ask for something, what's available out there that can do this for them, and let them explore what's the best fit on their own. But you guys have quite a few offerings for that, so you've definitely added a lot of functionality, I would say, within the Power Platform with the various visuals that you have.
Perfect. No, thank you very much, Reid. I really enjoyed being in your show.
Yeah, this has been great, and I think we've managed to queue through all the questions. But as we're wrapping up, if anyone else had a remaining one to finish up, drop it into the chat window, and I'll throw it onto the screen. But otherwise, Martin, again, I thank you for taking time out of your day to show this. It's certainly been really useful, and I'm glad to be able to finally get a detailed introduction to the various tools you guys have. It's certainly clearly tell there's a lot of time and effort that's been put into the design of that. Out of curiosity, with what of all the visuals that you had to build, which one took like the most time and effort for your, I would say, like development team to build out?
But to be honest, I would love to say, oh, it's really complex to develop these visuals, but the visuals are the easy part. The complex part is the
Okay.
backend. The visuals is we have an API in place that is well defined, and
Mm-hmm.
to develop visuals is easy. If you have API calls that get you to the functionality, for example, for a write
Yep.
back and all the different write back scenarios, and I don't know, editing models and all this stuff, then the development of the visual is relatively easy. But if you ask me, our most widely used one is matrix. So the multi-dimensional matrix planning,
Mm-hmm.
which, as you saw, and I haven't even shown you the more complex features like for constraint satisfaction planning, where you have the option, for example, to write back on calculations. You have an EBIT target, and then you want to change the EBIT target, and that automatically should adapt all the dependent variables of that, and this can get very complicated. Particularly, you have a lot of different constraints there, but the visual can handle these. But again, the complexity is in the backend engine to handle these constraint satisfaction criteria. The front end is relatively easy, but overall, matrix would be the most sophisticated visual.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And like I said, I think you've managed to hit a nice kind of interaction between complex actions that it's doing, but a fairly simple interface to allow people to know how to use it without having to click like a thousand buttons, or in
Correct.
this case, write too much code for most of these things. So well
Exactly.
designed for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
That's
yeah,
the
I
biggest
think
challenge. That's the biggest challenge.
exactly, yes. And like a lot of that, I'm sure comes with testing and feedback too from clients and other people to figure out what needs to be added, removed, or changed. I think we
Correct.
can probably start to wrap up then. No other questions. Had a good viewership and people who were definitely actively involved with asking the questions today. So thanks everyone for the questions as well who were tuning in at the time. And this video, of course, for everyone will be available pre-recorded, and we have a couple of thank yous at this point. So again, really thank you for coming in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and this will be something I'll definitely want to start playing around with, and I'll check out a few of those demos in the theme gallery as well, just to kind of see what aesthetic designs were put into those.
Awesome. No, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, if you have any questions, of course, feel free to contact me, my team. We have offices in Asia Pacific, that's where our headquarters is, but we also have main offices in Europe, in the US. We have support centers in 3 regions. Feel free to contact our team and I, and we'd love to chat with you.
Perfect. Yep. And the relevant details and links are all down in the little video description, so check those out if you want to reach out to Martin or any of his team at all. Excellent. Well, Martin, have a great rest of your night and enjoy your weekend, and everyone else, I will see you online next week for the next live stream.
Perfect. Thank you, Reed.
All right. Cheers. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships as well. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on social media to help pass on this awesome content and to help the channel grow. So until next time.